So welcome to this video, which is about speech number 1 and introducing yourself, which is what the assignment is. So this being our first speech, there's something that's a little bit perhaps unfamiliar to you, which is that for each speech that we do in class, there will always be a criteria list that identifies all of the different items that I'm looking for when I'm grading the speech. And for this speech, as it's meant to be kind of informal and introductory, it just has a few items that we'll be looking at to grade the speech. And in fact, there are 6 things that are going to count towards that grade. And so this list that you're seeing in the video now are what those 6 things are. So for content in the speech, we're looking for an introduction. So you'll introduce yourself. The second thing in the list is that you'll tell some kind of story. The third is that you will refer in some way to past, present, and future. Just continuing in that column, the next thing there, it says 1 to 2 minutes. Now, of course, I have that in italics and it's blue because it's not something that you're going to be graded on for this speech. But for every speech that we do, there always is a time frame that you're supposed to fall within. And for this speech, because it's your first time doing it, I think it's better to just give it to you as a guideline. And so maybe your speech might be a little short, it might be a little bit too long, but that's the time frame that you're working towards. And so for each speech after this one, the time will always be counted as part of the grade, but for this one, it's just a guideline. So then we also have 3 items which are regarding the delivery in the speech. And so that is that you're supposed to make eye contact. So remember in the previous video, I mentioned that while we're recording ourselves, making eye contact should indeed be that you are looking into the camera while you're delivering the speech as often as you can. What you want to avoid is to be reading to us while you're recording the speech. And so then that might be that you're looking down or you're looking over here or whatever that might be. Just look right at the camera as often as you can. If you need to use notes or refer to something to help you while you're giving the speech, then by all means you will do that. And you can look away sometimes. But for the most part, you do want to be maintaining eye contact. So maintaining contact with the camera. The next thing is then no apology. So stuff is going to go wrong. You're going to forget things. You might not have prepared as much as you wanted to, blah, blah, blah. Never tell us that. We don't need to hear it. Just do the speech as best as you can. And it will be what it will be. All right? So don't apologize. I'm sorry. Oops. Oh, that wasn't what I meant to say. Whatever. It'll be fine. As I'm making this video, I'm making mistakes all the time. I mean, you know, my cord is falling off of my lap, whatever. I'm carrying on. I don't need to call attention to it, even though I just did. Okay, and the last one then is breath. So remember in the previous video where we talked about, you know, how to overcome the fear, breathing is important, both to calm yourself, but also then to give your audience a little bit of time to catch up with what it is that you're talking about and make sure that they are digesting the information, okay? So what I'm going to do now is to demonstrate a practice version of the speech, of speech number 1. So here we go. Let's remember, content-wise, I've got to introduce myself. I've got to refer to a story. I'm going to tell a story, and I've got to talk about past, present, and future. So here goes. My name is Jonathan Jones, indeed, and I am a professor here at BMCC, teaching public speaking and theater, and I'm also a professor at NYU in the Steinhardt School where I teach educational theater. So when I was a kid, I used to play with dolls. In particular, I was growing up in the 1980s, and there was a particular kind of doll that was very popular. They're called Cabbage Patch Kids. If you don't know what they are, you'll go to Google and you'll search Cabbage Patch Kids, and you'll see what they are. They were very popular, 1983, 1984, 1985. So everybody in my family had them, and so I used to play with them. I would play school with the dolls. I was the teacher, and the dolls were the students. So the way that would work out, I had little chairs for the dolls to sit in. We had a desk in our house, and so I could use that as the teacher's desk. At one point, we even had a chalkboard, so like I could be the teacher. I had books on my desk. I had like a pencil cup and things, so like I could really get into playing school. Now, that, my friends, was an attempt, but it was not the speech that we're looking for. What went wrong? What went wrong? Did I introduce myself? Sure. I told you who I am, Jonathan Jones. That's my deal. I'm a teacher here at BMCC, NYU. Talked about that. Did I tell you a story? What is a story? We learned about stories when we were in elementary school, perhaps. So a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sometimes a story will have conflict. Something has to happen. I told you about the dolls and I played school and blah, 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 but nothing happened. It was just like, yeah, I used to play with dolls and we played school, and end. The next thing here, did I refer to past, present, and future? Well, the story was in the past. It was when I was a kid. Did I talk about the present? Well, a little bit, I guess. When I introduced myself, I said I'm a teacher now. But did I talk about the future? No. So let's try that again. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to, well, I was going to time myself, but I'm not going to. I already know it's going to be too long, so I'll just let it be. Here we go. So my name is Jonathan Jones. As I said, I am a professor here at BMCC and at NYU in the Steinhardt School. I teach at BMCC theater and public speaking. At NYU, I teach educational theater. And when I was a kid, there were these dolls. They were very popular, Cabbage Patch dolls, you know? And you can look them up online if you're curious. And we had lots of them in my family because there are lots of kids in my family. And so what I would do as a kid is that I would sit the dolls in little chairs, and I had a desk, and I would play school. I was the teacher. And so I would sit at the desk and do teacher things, you know, reading, whatever. I had books on the desk. I had cups of pencils and things. We had a chalkboard. I could give them assignments. They weren't very responsive, but you know, sometimes classes are like that. And so when one particular day, my brother, he came into the basement while I was in the middle of playing school, you know, and we had this toy. It's called a CNC. It was this round thing, and it had a string, and you pulled the string, and then there was like an arrow in the middle of the round part, and the arrow would spin around, and then it would land on some animal, like a cow, and it would go, the cow says, moo, or whatever animal it happened to be, you know, a CNC. So you see the thing, and it says what it is and tells you the sound. It teaches kids to connect words with pictures, you know. So he threw it at my head. And if you looked, you would see, if my camera was better, I have a scar in the middle of my forehead right here from where he threw this CNC at my head. So, I mean, it was a disaster. Blood gushing, a mess, you know. I had to be taken to the doctor's office at the Brentwood Family Health Care Center, what would now be like an urgent care center, but then they had different titles. And so I remember that I had to have been 5 years old. In fact, I had just turned 5 years old, because the doctor, he said to me after he was done with the stitches, he said, oh, how old are you? And I said, well, I just turned 5. And he said, well, that's remarkable, because I just gave 5 stitches to you, 5 stitches for the 5-year-old. Never forget it. So now I always remember, of course, that I was 5 years old when that happened. But I learned a very important lesson that day, that teaching can be a very dangerous profession. Now, I was teaching then in the past, of course, as playing school, but I've been teaching now for 15 years. And presently, as I told you, I still am teaching today. I teach at BMCC, I teach here, I do, and I also teach at NYU. That's the other place where I'm working. And in the future, I'm going to keep teaching. I don't really plan to do much else. Other things might happen, of course, but those are my immediate plans for sure. And I will keep teaching until I retire. And that is my story. Now, okay, so that is my story. So how did I do this time? Okay, so did I introduce myself? You bet I did. Did I tell you a story? Sure, something happened. My brother threw a thing at my head, you know, an event, okay? And did I connect to past, present, and future? You bet. Now, if I was going to outline this, okay, this is very informal. So the outlines we'll do later in the semester are much more formalized, and they have lots more specific categories that you have to provide information for. But for this speech, it's very simple. You just need to be able to answer these 3 questions. That's the content that we're looking for.
Right, mind the edit, update in progress. So for the speech one outline, as I say, we've got these 3 questions. Now, let's just look at an outline version of my presentation that I just shared. So the first question, how you introduce your partner to the class. When you look at the outline form, you're going to see that those 3 questions are there, and you need to write it out word for word, exactly what you intend to say, as you intend to say it. So I have here, my name is Jonathan Jones, and I'm a professor here at BMCC teaching public speaking and theater, and I'm also a professor at NYU in the Steinhardt School where I teach educational theater. So there I'm introducing myself. Story that I'm going to tell: when I was a kid, I used to play with dolls. In particular, I was growing up in the 80s. There was a particular kind of doll that was very popular. They're called Cabbage Patch Kids. If you don't know what they are, you'll go to Google and you'll search Cabbage Patch Kids and you'll see what they are. Okay. Now, obviously, this might not be word for word exactly what I said in the video, but that's okay. I'm writing the outline indicating what I intend to say, even though that might change a little bit. You'll notice here that in what I have on the screen right now, I have shortened this version of the story, and that's just because of space so that it'll fit on the screen. When you look in the instructions on Brightspace, you'll see that it's a little closer to the full story. Still might be shortened a little bit. Anyway, then at the end, connecting the story to present and future, I learned then that teaching can be a dangerous profession. Today I'm still teaching, and in the future I'll continue teaching until I retire. So all of that, more or less, is what I intend to say in the speech. So when you're doing your outline, you'll use the same approach. It's important not to use bullets. We're writing in complete sentences. You're writing it exactly as you intend to say it. It's not an essay. So when you look at the outline form, there's 3 questions that are there. You're writing something next to each question or each prompt. And our outlines will always function that way. Even if they're not questions, they'll just have headings in the later outlines, but so that you're putting something next to each piece that's required. And for this outline, there's 3 pieces that are required. Then, so no essays. It's not just like paragraphs, like you wrote an essay about yourself. Instead, we're just filling in information into the form, just like I've done here. There's one question, there's a response, another question, more response, another question, and more response. Okay. Now, the last thing, use the headers, leave them on the page. So since when you look at the outline form, it has those 3 questions there, you have to keep those questions on the page. It is a requirement that you use the form I give you. If for some reason you can't make it work or you decide you want to recreate it, it needs to look the same as what I gave you. So you need to put those 3 questions just the way they appear on the form and in the instructions for this outline assignment. And then you're filling in information for each question. Now, the requirement here is that you have to tell a story. There's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. Okay, a story takes place at a particular time and place and has something highly specific that happened. So you might think about this like if you had the 5 W's, like that can help you to like think about, have I said enough to tell a story? So who is there? What happened? When? Where was this going on? Perhaps why? Okay, if that's important to the story that you're telling. The thing is to talk about one day when something happened. When and where was it? Who was there? What happened? Who said what? And why was that one day significant? That's what's going to be a story. So I can't just say like, oh, I used to play with dolls, period. Now I'm going to school to become a nurse. I used to play with dolls is like a general thing. Now let's be real specific. On one day, this one thing happened. And because that one thing happened, it made me realize why I want to become a nurse. Now, for some of you, the story, it might not connect that well. That could be okay. But generally, that's how you want to think about it. If I'm going to say something about my present and my future, today I'm studying to be um, I'm studying business administration, and in the future, I hope to have X, Y job, whatever, and what kind of company that I want to work at or something if I'm doing business. So the story should talk about something about why you decided to become a business major. Okay, when I was in high school, I had this teacher and they told me blah, blah, blah. Be very specific on what day, when. Okay, so one day we were talking about such and such a topic, and that made me realize that, like, oh, I had been thinking about my life all wrong, and it made me like have a big epiphany about what my future could be like or something. I don't know. I don't know your story, but you got to figure out a story that you're going to tell. Okay, now if you're like me, I mean, I've got a million stories. I'm a storyteller. I'm a theater maker. That's what I do. I tell stories. So I remember, first of all, I remember everything that happened in my life. And in the second event, I am used to talking about it and knowing the details and this kind of thing. But for you, like you might think, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know my stories that well, or I don't know if I have a story to tell. Everybody has some kind of story to tell. You have lived your life, people. Stuff happened to you. You're going to find something that you're going to share with us, something that you feel comfortable sharing with the people through a video. Okay, and how are you going to figure that out? If you're like me and you already know and you have ideas, then just take some notes so that you're like thinking about, okay, I might write about this, I might talk about that part, okay, this is the future part, okay, whatever. And then I do my outline. I do my outline because I'm all ready to do that. I know what I'm going to talk about. If you're not like me, and you're not as certain, that's okay. We can figure it out. And so in the instructions for the speech one outline, you will see that there is a document that's there to help you think of a story that you could tell. And that's called the personal data sheet. And so if you go to the personal data sheet, you're going to see that there is, we'll call this a brainstorming activity, okay? And what you get there is a list of questions, a list of 9 questions that are there to just get your mind thinking about different stuff that is important to you or that happened to you or whatever it might be. So you're going to see on this form that there are 9 questions, and they're going to be things like, what's your greatest fear? And where did that come from? Maybe not that. What's your worst nightmare? Maybe those aren't things you want to talk about. What's your biggest dream? What is your major, and why did you decide that that should be your major? These kinds of that can just give you like some different prompts to think about different moments in your life that are important to you in some way. And so what I recommend that you do is to look at those 9 questions and not try to answer all of them. Don't do that. Instead, just read through the list of 9 questions and say, are there any of these that are particularly important or that make me remember some moment in my life when I was very young, last month, I don't know, whatever, sometime in the past? Think about the past, okay? And then what are some of the details about that thing that I could write about? So what you want to do is you want to really find one question in those ones that are there, that sparks a memory for you that you could share with us briefly, okay? And to say that, if you look at all 9 questions, you think like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that, or, oh, I have something for here, maybe. Oh, but actually, this one, number 5, that's the perfect question for me. Actually, I could really talk about that. Okay. And it's short, remember. So for speech 1 here, we're only wanting 1 to 2 minutes. So it doesn't have to be like your whole life story, people. All right. None of these assignments are meant to be your whole life story. Just some specific thing that you can share with us, that introduces yourself to us in some way, and that in some way connects to what you're doing right now as a student or in your work life or in your family life, whatever, something that you're doing now in the present. And in what way does that connect to something that you're going to do in the future? And that's all it needs to be, okay? But use the personal data sheet if you're not sure, okay? Or if you're one of the people who would say, I don't have any stories to tell. You do, I promise you do. And use that form to help you find them, okay? Once you've identified which the story is that, or which question you think that is helpful for you, then you'll use that as you're putting the outline together. Do not feel compelled. It doesn't have to be one of those 9 questions. If you want to talk about something else that's not there, that's okay. That's okay. All right. It's up to you, but those questions are just there to get you thinking about stuff. And it's important to know you're talking about yourself and your life. So be mindful of what you're willing to share, what you're comfortable sharing. We're not going to be making these videos public to the whole world, but we will share the videos with everybody else in class. So talk about things that you're comfortable with the other people who are in class knowing, okay, and not knowing for the rest of their lives. I'll just watch the video and they'll move on. Don't you worry. Okay, tips. So remember that overall it's going to be 1 to 2 minutes in length. So it's not a huge amount. It's not like your whole life story, but just one specific thing. You're using the personal data sheet if that's helpful for you to come up with an idea for a story that you'll tell. But in the outline, you're just going to be responding to those 3 questions, how you're going to introduce yourself, what story you're going to tell, and how you'll connect that to the present and the future. And then from there, you'll submit that. The outline is what you'll submit as the assignment, which is happening in Module 2. And then you will submit the outline. Where's my mind? And then I'll give you feedback, certainly, but then otherwise you'll be recording a video of yourself presenting the speech if you're doing the online version of the class, which will be the case for most of you if you're watching this. Okay, if you have questions, let me know, but otherwise I look forward to seeing what you come up with when I read your outline in full sentences as you intend to say it. Take care.